This week's parsha is Parsha Mishpatim, and I heard this Torah from Bernstein. So he says as follows: this week's parsha begins with a bit of a strange way of opening. It says Ve'ela Mishpatim asher tasimu lifnehem, and we have the same question that we had when we opened the Chumash Mot. It said Ve'ela Shmot b'nei Yisrael, right? These are the names. Why are we starting a whole book with the word and? I mean and ve'ela. Just say ela, right? So to here in our parsha, why are we saying ve'ela hamishpatim? Just say ela hamishpatim. That's totally fine. So Rashi comments on this and he's quoting the Midrash and he says, because marishonim misinai, af elu misinai. Just as these first commandments, as in the Aseret Dibrot, were from Sinai, so too these upcoming commandments are also from Sinai. Okay. So what's the Midrash teaching us? What's it informing us of? Why does it need to emphasize that the mitzvahs that we're about to see are also from Sinai? Presumably, all of the mitzvahs are from Sinai. That would have been our first guess. And moreover, why do we start with an Eved Ivri? Now again, you could easily say, well, look, the Torah's got to start somewhere. If you start with Eved Ivri, you'll say, why Eved Ivri? You start with anything else, you'll be like, okay, well, why that? But actually, the question with Eved Ivri is a pronounced question. And the reason why is because, how do you become an Eved Ivri? How does that happen? When do you become a Hebrew servant, bondsman, whatever translation you'd prefer? And the answer to that is, well, actually, it doesn't happen on its own. It happens after a person steals. If a person steals and does not have the wherewithal, doesn't have the money to pay back, then he gets sold into slavery to the person that he stole from. Now, what's interesting about this is the fact that first there's a prohibition against stealing, and that actually appears later on in our parsha. Then you could teach Eved Ivri, but here the parsha doesn't even start with the law of stealing. It just says Eved Ivri, but you're starting in the middle of the story. Yeah, we don't even know about the whole stealing prohibition yet. Start with that and then come to Eved Ivri. So what is so special about Eved Ivri, which really sets the tone for the body of Torah law known as Mishpatim? That is our question. That is what we want to come to solve. Now, Bernstein wants to point out that although the Torah does exhort the other nations of the world, non-Jews, and the non-Jews to set up a court system, it does not require them to incorporate all Torah law. Doesn't do that. They can set up their own system as long as they have a system. Now it's interesting because we assume that the Torah system is the best one, so why not just give them the best? Now the answer to this question will actually really bring us to a fundamental understanding of what Mishpatim are all about. Now we've discussed this idea in other ways before, but although it's true that these laws, of course, are something we could call civil law, right? The laws of torts, the laws of contracts, like how does this work? Nevertheless, they are ultimately part of Torah, and as such, they do partake of the spiritual quality of every mitzvah. When a person hires a worker and pays them back, then yes, of course, yes, you're fulfilling your obligation, your contractual obligation to pay someone the amount you told them to do so, but it's also a mitzvah. And even though it makes total sense, it does have a spiritual quality, but moreover, not only does it partake of the spiritual quality, it's also interconnected with all the other mitzvahs. And now this idea finds very clear expression in the laws of Eved Ivri, in at least two ways. First, the first is fairly well known. How long does an Eved Ivri work for? He works for 6 years. Why? Because there is a connection between the 6 years of the Eved Ivri and the 6 days of Shabbat. The 6 days of the week, or the work days of the week. So for 6 days, we work, right? Then, once Shabbat comes in, those 6 days come to a halt, and we stop working. So too with an Eved Ivri. For 6 years, he works, and then the 7th year, even if he hasn't paid all the money back, he goes free. And so it's interesting is with Eved Ivri, right, right now we're dealing with civil law, but here we go, we already have a reference to Shabbat. And not only that, if the Eved Ivri decides to continue on past the 6 years, he can do that as long as he's not. He can do that. So he can do that. But he goes free at the Yovel. Now, why? What's the deal with the Yovel? Because God says that all avadim will go free at the Yovel year. Why? Because the God says his reasoning explicitly in Vayikra, because Kili avadim, because you are my slaves. You aren't the slaves of other people, and other people aren't your slaves. Everyone is my slave. That's the way this works. And so all avadim have to go free. What's interesting is, well, when did we become God's people? When did we become His servants? And so that happened, of course, at the redemption from Egypt. That's I guess a reference to Pesach. So now we have Evet Ivri, and we have a reference to Shabbat, and we have a reference to Pesach. And so we see that just through this one basic law, Evet Ivri, we now have like this kind of interconnected mitzvah that's reminding us of all of these other mitzvahs. And so now we can get a better appreciation for why Gentiles are not required to incorporate what's called the jurisprudence of of Torah law. They don't need to adjudicate the way we adjudicate. They don't have to do that. They just need to set up their own case law or their own statutes, and then we do and that's fine. And the reason why is because they don't need to, or even are expected to, or even should have laws that reference Shabbat or Pesach. And so we see that Evet Ivri is a wonderful mitzvah to kind of illustrate just how interconnected each one of the Torah's mitzvahs are to some of the other mitzvahs. We'll leave it over there. Shabbat Shalom.